Welcome, everyone. Hello, I'm Brenda Murray, and this is Studio 56. And today I have the great privilege to interview Albert Kiefer from the Netherlands. And Albert is going to talk to us about alcohol-based markers and his gorgeous work. He does. He is at howsketcher on Instagram, and we're going to look at a lot of examples of his beautiful work. And so let's bring Albert into the call. There he is. Hi, Albert.
There he is, flying in with his dynamic camera.
I know. So Albert's camera follows him around. And so it looks like he has a whole, you have like
I'm
a
not on
whole
a ship.
video team behind, like a big camera. I'm picturing, lights, camera, action, and they're moving the camera, but it's just your Mac. So
Yeah.
Just to let people know, if you're new to Studio 56, you should know that in addition to hosting free demos and interviews like this one, we also produce online workshops for artists, and we organize vacation workshops for artists in gorgeous locations around the world. You can watch recordings of our free interviews and our free demos on our YouTube channel and find out more about our vacation workshops at our website, www.studio56boutique.com. So anyway, Albert, welcome. Great to see you.
Hi. Nice to have me. Thank you.
And so I just want to read your bio. Albert studied at the Academy of Arts in Maastricht to get a degree in teaching art. After 30 years working as a computer graphic artist, he started sketching with pen and paper in 2016. And his goal is to make at least one sketch every day. Slowly, his love of architecture emerged as the theme for his work. And during the pandemic, he narrowed his theme to stores and older built structures in Japan, many of them in Tokyo. He has 259,000 Instagram followers. So obviously people are really interested in your work and how that works. Albert is now has a successful course on Domestika about his sketching work, and he is currently writing a book on the subject, due out next year. So maybe you can come back next year and show us your book.
Yeah, sure. That would be nice.
And when will it be published?
I think the published date will be around August 2024. So that will be the date around which it will be brought out.
And the
working
title?
Yeah.
The working title?
Working title is House Sketching.
Okay.
It's a working title, so it's not definitive yet, but probably befitting of my working title name, Albert Kiefer, House sketching would be nice. But it's a working title for the moment.
Cool. So Albert, all of the sketches that I've seen of yours on Instagram are all using alcohol-based markers. And I know nothing about alcohol-based markers. How did you get into using alcohol-based markers?
That was completely random. Like you said in the introduction, I started sketching again, really traditional sketching, because most of the work that I do professionally is on the computer, is 3D graphics, is working in Photoshop, retouching, creating images, and that's all digital. I started working digital from the late 80s when computers first were introduced, or were first affordable for mere mortals like me. It was still expensive, but at least not in the hundreds of thousands anymore. And I loved that. So when I got the chance, I dove into computer graphics. Photoshop did not even exist. Now it's a verb, I photoshopped this, I photoshopped that. At that time, it was like, oh, let's see if Photoshop can really be a substitute for other pixel painting programs that were there. And I was there before that. So that's how old I am. Working in digital, right when I left the Academy of Arts, I completely stopped working traditionally. So dove into digital work, and that has lasted for almost 30 years. And now to get back to the question, always correct me, because I drift off from questions, so keep in mind the question. But I suddenly thought, I want to go back and do some traditional drawing again because I haven't done that for a while. I kept postponing the moment because I am a relentless perfectionist. Everything needs to be precise. Everything needs to fit. Everything needs to be thought out. And the one thing that I thought was, okay, I haven't done traditional sketching in 30 years, so that will suck. And that's why I thought, well, maybe I should wait a little while to start this up again. And that's an endless loop because you can wait forever. If you don't start, you will never get over that first point of like getting better, improving your work. You need to put in the mileage. You need to put in your sketching work again. So there was one point when I was at an art supply store with my wife. She's a painter. She does portraits, and I cannot. They resemble. If she makes a portrait, it resembles the person. If I make a portrait, it looks like a house.
It looks like a windows for eyes.
Yeah. So, but she was buying some supplies, and I was waiting for her in the queue, and I was looking around, and I saw in one of these carousels, I saw books like these, which had no lines and blank pages. So I thought, well, let me grab one of these books. And I looked around and I thought, okay, let's grab some markers. Okay, this is colored stuff. They were markers. I remembered I have a lot of books. If I zoom the camera around here, I close all the things off. If I go to that side, behind this is there are a lot of books. Just to make things quiet and not like overwhelmingly chaotic. But I have a lot of Star Wars books, and the concept artists in the 70s, they didn't have computers. They had markers, and I always loved how these pen and line and marker, hey, I will not move because otherwise the camera gets seasick. But all that marker stuff, I love that. So when I saw markers in that store, I thought, well, let me grab some markers, a gray one and a brown one and a green one and a blue one. And let me take them with me. And I also need something to make my lines. Right. So I grabbed a couple of fine liners, which were just lying there as well. So I didn't look like, okay, what would be a good fine liner? Will it work with alcohol-based markers?
You just gotta try it.
I just grabbed it.
Yeah. So I have a question about these alcohol-based markers.
Yeah.
What's the difference between an alcohol-based marker and a water-based marker?
Big difference. The one really big difference is alcohol-based markers dry instantly.
Okay.
So you never have to, like, if you're sketching, you don't have to wait like, okay, let's wait. And the pages don't bubble up. If you have heavy paper with water-based markers, that might not be a problem. Okay. But with alcohol-based markers, you don't have that problem at all. It's smooth.
You can work on very thin paper.
I work actually on quite thick paper. It's not because, like I said, I just bought these materials randomly. Yeah. This is a normal sketchbook. This one's from Moleskine, and since I'm a very faithful person, number 40, I think this is number 41.
Wow.
Is the same brand and the same size as my number 1 sketchbook. Okay. It has a little bit thicker paper. It's not really meant for markers because marker paper is actually really white, and I hate really white. You can see that even in the harsh light. This is a little bit yellowish paper. It's not like really white, and that's something. I didn't look at the book at the time that I bought it like, should I buy a more cream colored or white? I just bought that book. So, but in hindsight, all these things fit, and that's a good thing. But On this paper, the only thing that you need to take into account, if you look at the sketches, if you look at the back page of this sketch, for instance, and I
Yeah.
turn it around, they bleed through mercilessly. If you
Ah,
get to put something in between, it's the really seasick apple thing. But if you forget to put something in between, it will bleed through to the next page. And if you work really hard at it, these pages, they don't get destroyed. With water-based media, I'm not sure. But I can work on this paper and push through and go deeper and deeper and deeper with markers. The only thing that happens, and that happened to me 3 days ago, it bled not only through, I use these things, I call them bleed sheets.
okay. So my
And I
question
put
is,
them,
does it matter what thickness of the paper is? It's always going to bleed through regardless of the thickness
it's,
of the paper.
yeah, if it's really thick paper, it will probably not bleed through, but if it's really thick and absorbing, it'll suck your marker dry in no time.
Ah,
And as you might recall, markers can be really expensive. So you
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
want like a
So
six,
probably the best thing is to use a thinner paper,
yeah,
and that way, and
thin
it
and
doesn't
smooth.
buckle, and then
Yeah,
just put something underneath. And
yeah. I
cool.
use I'll use these. I have many bleed sheets
Yeah,
because if they're full, I cannot. I also use them as like a test sheet where I just put a little mark on it to see. Okay, yeah, that's the color I want. I have other things to check for that. I
yeah,
have um, uh, reference sheets that like I'm always like trying to be super prepared as
yeah.
being this really chaotic house sketcher.
So,
But
so my question is, if it dries so quickly, so instantly, and you've got your bleed sheet there, once your sketch is done, you can close the book. It's not
yeah,
going to. It'll be
absolutely.
fine. Okay. So
You
I have
can
a
even,
question about overlapping the markers to get. So if you overlap, I'm assuming, say you have one color, you've got an orange, and then you overlap the next line of orange. That overlap is going to be darker,
yeah.
like a normal marker
So
would.
yeah, so it works. The way of working is actually the same as that you would do with watercolor. You go from light gradually down to dark.
Right.
So with markers, it's the same thing. You start with the lightest color or the lightest value, and then gradually you go down to darker.
Okay.
That's the way to work. And if you overlay, it's not really that if you have like a 50% gray marker, at some point in time, that 50% gray marker will not start to look like a 90% gray marker. Not if you go 10 times over it, because all it does is make the page wetter.
Yeah.
Because yeah, if you saturate it with alcohol, it's still going to stay wet a little bit longer. But once that evaporates, the color will dry up, still going back more or less to that 50% gray. So it will not be like, okay, I have a 10% gray, and if I go over it like a zillion times, I have
Yeah.
black. It will
Yeah.
not do that.
No. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, let's turn our cameras off so that people can see the actual sketch, the sketches. And Helen is saying, is O Japan likely to be available once again at any point?
I would think that the O Japan book is available in Amazon stores. I would not think that they're not available, but it might be because I don't always check. That's not the O Japan book has been published by a French publisher called Elitis. Um, and they probably control where they are going to bring the book, where they are going to make it available. So if that's in the US, in France, in Europe, I don't think that there's any place that you don't, that you're not able to buy it. So I'm not sure about the US or Canada. But be aware on Amazon, too bad for me. There are, like, if you look for Albert Kiefer or House Sketcher, you have this Au Japon book, and you have 6 others that are not by me, but they
Okay.
all have my illustrations in it. And there's
Okay.
2
Oh, all
people,
right.
it's ripoffs. And they downloaded things from Instagram and put them in a book. You can publish books on Amazon just like you would publish a photo book. And just look for it. If you look for Albert Kiefer and sketches or Japan, you will see not only the Au Japon book, but many others that are not done by me, but
You
they
can
have my
report
art.
that. You can
And
report
I
that.
have found, yeah, but I found no way to like report a copyright infringement. There's no really easy way like Amazon, notify us of copyright infringement and we'll take care of it. They're still on, and they even get really good reviews sometimes. I had my students from Domestika, the ones that already did the course, I asked them like, okay, there's ripoffs out there. Maybe put in a bad review and say that those are not books by me. Maybe that, because I got bad reviews there as well, like, Albert Kiefer makes great sketches, but his books are terrible because the
It's not
quality
even
is,
your book.
and it's not my book, so I get the
I'm
bad
really
name.
sorry. That's
So
terrible.
that's a bad. But
I've
going
got some ideas. I'll try to help you after. We'll have a
okay,
chat about that
okay,
because I've faced this, believe me, lots of times. So anyway, we'll chat. Albert, let's turn off our videos and then we can show everybody
sure.
your beautiful sketches. Here we go. All right. Gorgeous, gorgeous sketch, Albert. I love
Thank
it so
you.
much. I love it so much. And I'm so glad that we had a chance because, you can talk about alcohol markers all you want, but people really need to see examples so they can understand how it works. And so, my question for you is how, like when you're applying the alcohol markers, how do you not get streaks? Like, because the width of the nib of the alcohol marker is only so wide. And if you have a larger space to cover, how do you do that without getting, streaks and lines, like seeing the actual lines?
Well, there is again like the Lady Fortuna who came to the rescue, because when I bought that random stuff, I happened to buy a book, the one that I showed you. It's actually quite a small book. In European sizes, it's called an A5. It's in centimeters. It's 13 centimeters by 21 centimeters.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually like quite a small paper size. And that was perfect for the width of the alcohol markers. And what you see in this sketch, for instance, you can see the width of the marker especially in the blue sky, because there you see all these touches and these blue bands. And the width of that band is actually the width of my tip.
Right.
It's a chisel tip. The markers, most of the markers, you have 2 types of markers. You have, and both types have 2 points on one end and on the other end.
Okay.
One type of marker has a chisel tip and a hard fine tip. And the other one has a chisel tip and a brush pen on the other side, so you can brush with it. And
Oh,
I almost always use the chiseled tip, and that's what you see. If you look at basically all of my sketches, you will see that width of the marker of the chisel tip, you see that in there. You can see it in this sketch, yeah, like I said, in the blue. What you can also see is if you turn the tip around, and you can do that in mid stroke, you can get a fine line. You see that in the top, on the top of this sketch, you see both broad
yeah.
and finer lines. I just
Right.
turned in mid stroke, I turned my marker around and made these smaller, thinner lines. It's
Okay.
the same. It's the same tip, but I just used the thinner point of it.
Okay, cool. And are you putting in the ink line first and then you're adding the alcohol marker afterwards?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first thing that I do is make the sketch, the line sketch. For that line sketch, going back a little to my starting point with the random material and everything, I set a couple of rules for myself. Since I work very precise in my digital daily work, I decided that I did not want my sketches to be precise. I wanted to be as relaxed as possible. I wanted things not to be straight, uh, because that for me would like kill the life of a line. And that's something that you see also in well, but you see that in every sketch that I make. For instance, here, these white teeth underneath the top of that roof, under that triangle, you see these 1, 2, 3, 4 teeth that were probably like support beams for supporting that roof.
Uh-huh.
And you see that they are not like parallel to each other.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, in the photograph, they were really very, very parallel. But I consciously make them not parallel because for me, I want to keep that alive. And you see that in all the strokes, that they are consciously not parallel.
Right.
Because if you start to do things really neatly, it will look that way. And that was a conscious decision from the beginning to like not do things precise and neat, but to stay very loose and relaxed in the lines. And one way that grew out of that is, and what I described a lot of times, is that you can compare it or imagine it as writing your lines, just as you write words. So it's not, because there's a technique which is called continuous line. I don't mean that, where you never take the pen off the paper, because I don't want it to be like a trick, like, look, I made this with one line.
Yeah.
That's not my point.
Right.
But I don't take it off a lot. I want the lines to flow. And
Yeah.
that is almost like writing, because with writing as well, you don't make one continuous line, but you still stay on the page a lot. And that's what I try to compare with the lines here. I write my lines, and doing the black lines first is a way for me to have that structure, to have the base of the sketch ready, and from there I start to fill in the colors.
Yeah. Okay. So you just touched on something that I'd like to just elaborate, get you to elaborate on a little bit. So you are a perfectionist, and
Yeah.
the kind of work that you do is very exact, very precise kind of work. And but in your free time for fun, your sketching is very loose. So I'm thinking to myself that this is probably a goal that a lot of people in this call have, and that is to have a more loose kind of sketch. And if you are a person who's very exacting, it's really tough to do that. And so I'm thinking this must be like a real struggle for you, or at least maybe it was at the beginning, to go from being super, super precise and exacting to being loose like this. Is it still a struggle now?
Well, actually, from the beginning, it was not that hard to do, because by deciding for myself and committing myself to saying, okay, I don't want to have something that is precise and exact, which at the beginning most probably would not have happened even if I wanted it to, because I hadn't sketched in a long time. So the motor skills were not there anymore. I can move the mouse and I have a graphics pen, so it's not really that extreme, but I can move a mouse around my desk. But it's a totally different movement than having a pen in your hands and sketching. And since I made a decision to not be precise, I could always fall back on like, okay, this might not look quite nice, but that is what I wanted to do. So for me, I never had the problem of, oh, this doesn't look very nice. It was just supposed to be that way, and I could, yeah, more or less hide behind the fact that the stuff wasn't precise. So it wasn't hard for me, and I learned from a lot of people that actually working like this is, for many people, also in the course that I do,
Mhm.
very liberating. I
Sure,
hear a
yeah.
lot that, like, oh my God, it's so liberating not to be precise and just don't care about if things work out. Be prepared to mess up, because that's the only way you start to free up a little.
Yeah.
Don't expect, like, don't go for a masterpiece on the page. That's also something that I say a lot. If you waste it, turn the page. If it's a
Yeah.
really, really good one, turn the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always anew. Don't fall in love with your sketch, but also don't hate your sketch. If
Right.
something turns out a certain way, move on to the next one, regardless of how it turns out.
Right, right. So, Albert, are you using other things besides a pen and the alcohol markers? And I'm asking that because I look here at some of the red and sort of aqua colors that are on top of a darker color.
Yeah,
And I'm
good
thinking,
question.
it looks like opaque, some kind of
Yeah,
opaque. Maybe I can zoom in. Ah, there we go. Can you see?
that's a good question, and the answer is yes, I do. That has evolved over time, because at first I only had these 5 or 6 colored markers, as you can see and count in this image. I have a lot more now, but at some point in time I missed the ability to go over the dark parts and add some light spots to it. And it
Right.
might be like window frames. Sometimes I um, try to keep them clean, but the disadvantage of trying to keep a very tiny white space, or in this case, if I would try to avoid the spaces around, or around the red, it would start, all these other colors would start to feel really forced, like, okay,
Yeah.
you try to avoid that white spot which you wanted to make red.
Right.
So, and for that I have a set of they're white or colored acrylic pens.
Oh,
There's lots of brands, and the one that I use, and they all probably share the same thing. They are not, here you can see the white, for instance, over that dark. What that white does is add a lot of depth. And what you can also see in that white, if you could zoom in on this one a little,
yeah. Uh-huh.
uh, you see that there's differences in shades of white. And that is
Right.
also something that is very important, but also adds very much to the depth of the image. What I do when I have finished the sketch, and finished in a sense that when I finish the main stages in the sketch, that will be like going from light to dark. When that is done, I have everything in place. Then there comes a phase where I take that white, or like you see in the top right corner, you see, and in the left, you see yellow spots. And on the top right, you see some red spots and these white lines. I have a couple of these acrylic pens, and I start to draw and dash with these things.
Right.
And on top of that, I push back some, especially some of the whites, to push them back in, because if there's one thing that will kill the depth, is if you have this uncensored white on top of stuff that looks shaded.
Right.
If you have really white lines, it flattens the image a lot. And if you take, you have to wait for this, because the acrylic pens are water-based. So this is a stage where you draw these lines, and then you have to wait. It might be a minute or two. It still dries very fast because it's all tiny lines. It's not really that big a
Right.
surface that they cover. But wait a little, and then you stroke over that lightly with, in this case, it will probably like a 50 or 60% dark gray marker. And you see that in this one as well. There's a lot of depth and dynamics in these white lines because I stroked over them with this darker shade of marker again.
So you're talking percentages here. Are you saying that the alcohol-based markers have a percentage on them so that when you do a stroke, you get a certain percentage of saturation?
Depending on which brand you use. If you have a Copic, which is one of the main brands that I use, the reason for that being they are refillable. So it's not like if you have a marker and it's completely dried up, you throw it away. These markers, as soon as the alcohol-based fluids are gone or almost gone and look like dried lines, you can refill them. And you can refill them around 5 to 6 times. There's refillable bottles for everyone. And so that way I don't have to like throw away a marker as soon as one color pass or one go with a marker. As soon as that is finished, that I need to throw it away. So
Right.
the Copics are in that sense more sustainable. And the Copics have a numbering system on them. And the numbering system is usually it's a letter. They start with a letter and then 2 digits. And I'm looking at one right. Yeah, I look at a dozen right now. But to give you an example, you have a Copic marker that is called B06. The B stands obviously for blue. The 0 stands for the amount of saturation of a color. So the lower the number, 0 is the lowest, the most saturated it will be. And the second digit is the number of the lightness of the marker. If that is 0, you have a very light, very saturated, but if you have a 00 like blue 00, it's a really light blue. If you have like a B99, you have a very grayish kind of super dark, almost black blue.
Yeah.
So there I can quickly see. So if I have the last digit, if that's a 1 or a 2 or a 3, I'm still in the top range of values, so in the lighter values. If I grab a 7, an 8, or a 9, I can tell by the number that it is a darker color. So in the one that you show here, for instance, I can be positive that even the dark browns will be in the 7s or the 9s. So that can be, the brown doesn't have a B because that's for the blue, but they have an E for earth colors. And it will probably be like an E29 or an E79, very dark colors. And you can read that from the numbering system, but it's only Copic that has that. Okay. The other brands have other names and other things to identify them. And for me, they are not really logic, but Copic does have that.
Okay, so these acrylic pens that you're putting on top, they're very opaque, right? They're like, yeah. It looks almost like a gouache or something.
Yeah. Again, acrylic pens have a tendency to sometimes leave you out hanging to dry. Which I mean, like, I want to have a really nice crisp white line and you draw it. You have to draw it like resolutely, because if you do that carefully, it looks, oh, that's a really carefully placed line. It doesn't look dynamic. Right. But sometimes you place that line resolutely and you don't see anything at all because it's not covering with white at all. It's very milky or sometimes even hardly visible. And sometimes it can be very thick in that you want a really thin line and it turns out really thick, so it's too heavy for the sketch. In this case here, the first thing that I do with these acrylic pens, the ones that I have are from, they're false one, and there makes one that makes a sound. They're from Uni Posca, and that is from the Mitsubishi Pencil Company.
Uni Posca is the
Uni
brand of
Posca.
the acrylic pens.
Yeah, the Uni Posca acrylic pens, and they have different sizes and they have different thicknesses. And these you have to really shake very vigorously before you begin. And that's also when I showed, before I showed you these bleed sheets, there are lots of marks on there as well from the Poscas, because I always test them out before I do the line work on the sketch. Because
Okay.
otherwise I might ruin the sketch. And sometimes I do ruin the sketch because I get in the heat of things. And the one that you had before this one with these blue tiles, you saw these really thick white dots on the bush, which were, yeah, this one. You see these, which are symbolic flowers on that green bush. And if I push too hard, out comes a really, really big blob. And it's totally uncorrectable. I have like a couple of paper towels here. The only thing you can do is dab away the excess fluid, wait for it to dry, and then correct with a lot of dark, and then putting on a little lighter one. But it might ruin it. And that happens to me regularly. So, but because I am too into the sketch and start pushing with these dots, and sometimes it will just put in a big blob.
Yeah. So I noticed that you've got the equivalent of watercolor splashes around your sketch, and
Yeah.
you're achieving that with your chiseled alcohol markers.
Yeah. That's something that I did from the beginning. Since I don't have, well, I tried. I cannot show it to you now because it would take a lot of time to dig that one up. What I like about watercolor paintings, it's a trick. It's a mannerism as well, like doing something like put in the splash. It looks dynamic. These dots are placed very consciously. So it's not like I splash around. I tried that once because I thought, hey, I finished the sketch. I have these refillable bottles for these Copics. Why not splash it onto the page?
Right.
That was not the best idea that I had. Because what happened was, I just got a big gush over the whole page. It punched not through one, but through 5 or 6 pages because it was completely wet, and it ruined my sketch. And so splashing with refillable bottles is something that is not really advisable because it doesn't work.
Right.
So I resorted to just dashing with the chisel tip of my marker. And I always use like a very dark, that's a cool gray C9 or C9, C8. So a very dark, cool gray.
And so I want to talk about your line. What are you using to accomplish this line, this black line?
The black line, you mean the sketch line?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand the question because
I'm just asking you, what is your material? What brand?
Okay, the material. It's I bought a couple of fine liners, and since with regular drawing tools, like maybe like a fountain pen, which is also used a lot in combination with watercolor, people that use fountain pens, the nice advantage of a fountain pen is that you can vary your line weight by pushing on it. Pushing harder, you get a thicker line. Pushing softer or hardly touching the paper, you get a very, very thin line. With fountain pens, you can get waterproof ink, the combination between the two ends up clogging. I have one here. It's a very expensive fountain pen, but waterproof ink tends to clog up and totally yeah, ruin your fountain pen. You need to clean it a lot. And since this ink doesn't dry immediately, that's something that I didn't do, but the random material again that I bought a couple of fine liners. Since fine liners have a fixed width, I bought a couple of varying widths. And in this case, I start out with the thinnest line. You see that here in the boarding of that building. Those are very thin fine liner lines. And on top of that, where I think or where I want accents to happen, not accidents, but accent lines, like lines that are really thick, I take one of the thicker fine liners and go over that, or create lines that I only need to be that thick. And that's well, more or less, it's a trick that I have learned from technical drawing from way before the computer and before sketching did this kind of sketching. If you did technical drawing, you had technical drawing pens. You had these in varying sizes, and they were metal tubes, so there's no pushing at all because you would just destroy your pen. And if you have outlines on a shape that you draw in technical drawing, you usually drew the outline with a thicker line. And that notion, I took that to my sketching, and I did this variation type of line work just as an experiment, but with the background of that technical drawing, like, okay, if I want to have accent lines, I can do the thicker lines. And here you see also, you see this nice interplay of thin lines and more thicker lines that gives a nice contrast and depth. And that also plays very nicely with these white lines. Again here, because what I see in a lot of my student work is that they put on, they got the hang of working with that white. And sometimes you see, hey, it's now really white, so let's white up the whole area and put all these white lines in there. But they stop there. And if you stop there, you get just a really chaotic white mess on top of your sketch. You need to integrate that back. And you can see that here in this sketch as well. I integrate the white back into the sketch by making it darker in places, not everywhere, but in places. And that gives it a lot of depth and integration.
Cool, very cool. I'm really enjoying looking at these a lot.
Hey, a motorcycle. So
Yeah.
how's Skipper Sind?
Something different. Well,
Yeah.
Obviously the line is very, very dynamic and very active lines here, and not a lot of precision, but you absolutely know exactly what you're looking at, and your mind fills in the blanks. And I'm just looking at how you do your background, like I noticed this, you used a blue, and you're using lines like this for the sky, and lines like this. And I think that it really adds a lot, like it gives it a lot of energy.
Yeah, the thing, let's get back to the motorbike for a moment, because you touched on something that I think is really important. It looks like everything is in place, but actually I think every motor buff who would look at this would probably be a little bit horrified to see that nothing is really in place. And that is something that I want to stress, and it's also something that I actively seek. It's not that I don't want to technically draw a perfectly good bike, but I think that by leaving out things or by more suggesting things, there is a lot of room for the viewer to interpret into it what this thing is about. This is about, like a bold statement of a motorbike, and not like that you should actually see the brand. And that's why you see that in these very dark areas here also that there's a lot of dark areas. And by just doing some swishes here and there, you can suggest either the spokes of the wheel, or you can suggest that suspension, touching it back again with this darker gray marker in places. You can suggest like reflections or highlights on the bike. And to come back to these dynamic lines in the background, first of all, you see the thickness of the chiseled point from the marker again. So that's how thick the marker is, which is also like something to keep in mind. If you go a lot bigger in page dimensions, your line will start to diminish in power. The bigger your paper, the less impressive your lines will be. So for me, there's a limit, like this is a size A5. If you put 4 of these together, you have a size A3. That's the maximum that I want to do, or even attempt with markers, because bigger than that, these lines will start to be so thin that it doesn't make any sense. They don't have that power anymore. And then there are a couple of bigger markers, but not a lot. So this is a limit in this case of working with markers and paper size. There's a really good, important relationship between the two.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's true. Okay, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous sketches. So I noticed that some of the lines that you're using are not black lines. Like in here, these are not black lines.
Yeah.
So what are you using in there?
That is also, that's not from the markers in this case. I have, let's see, because I don't use it that much, but that's also probably from the Mitsubishi company, because I see the same uni in front of it. I have a couple of uni pin. Yeah, they're like fine liners, and they have like fine liners in a light gray, in a medium gray, and in a dark gray. So in this case, I used a light gray to, so that's a light gray fine liner, basically. That's what it is.
Yeah. So Albert, do you sketch from life?
I sometimes do, but since my main job is sitting in exactly the same place as I'm doing the interview right now, I don't have a lot of time to do that, since the places here that I wanted to do are limited now, and the stuff that I really liked, thank you to COVID, is these Japanese houses. Why? Because yeah, you're showing one right now. I love the diversity of all the little things, and in this case, I'm sure that I added a lot of extra air conditioning units and a lot of extra satellite dishes, because then it looks like a Star Wars spaceship. So
Yeah.
that combination, you won't be able to find it here. But so I do a lot more on the computer, not on the computer, but behind the computer. I have a photograph on the computer that I draw from, when especially, certainly when I do these Japanese houses, because I don't have the money. I've never been to Japan. And I asked a couple of really nice and friendly Instagram photographers who live there if I was allowed to use their photographic material as an inspiration for my Japanese houses. And they were all very forthcoming in allowing me to do that. So that's one of the ways that I work. And also, since most of the time my sketches end up, like now in Holland, it's almost 8 o'clock. It's pitch dark. So if I would be finished with my work and go outside, it would not be very spectacular what you would see there. And for me, the main drive was never like, I want to do something this way or that way. My main drive was, I want to sketch every day. That was the main drive, because my assumption was, if I do this a lot, I might get better at doing what I do. And that's what I can now look back on, that I certainly can see a development. And like the one that you showed now, for instance, is also the one that you had previously, shows where I did a lot of improvisation. This thing didn't have a water tower on top. It didn't have like this small doghouse on top. But I love to do that. I
Yeah.
rearranged a lot of that stuff in this house.
I was thinking, the thing that I was just thinking, the thing that probably inspires you is these reference photos from these older Japanese neighborhoods, Japanese
Yeah,
homes that are different from what you're looking at every single day. So for
yeah,
me, if I were sketching in Amsterdam, I would be thrilled because it would be so inspiring because the house shapes, the building shapes there, just the shapes, the design, the style, the colors, the proportions, and everything else are completely different from what I see here in Ontario, Canada. And so
yeah.
it'd be very inspiring. And I was thinking for you, probably these Japanese shapes and the styles and the way the pieces of the buildings are put together are very, very inspiring. And that's, that's why we travel, and that's why we are excited by other cultures and so on.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get that. And I see here in this next sketch, people. I didn't know that you
yeah.
did people. What?
There was, and that's also, I mean, a really nice thing about Instagram is that they have sometimes have these periods where there's one period that just is past, which was Inktober. I didn't do it this year because I need to write that book, and I need
Yeah,
to finish it really soon.
right.
So time is very limited. But there's Inktober, where everybody can sketch with pure, just ink based.
Yeah.
The one that got me onto that Japanese stuff was actually a photograph where it said, "Draw this in your style." That was my first Japanese house, and that got me immediately in love with these Japanese houses. And this one is like, there's a period on Instagram where it's 100 people in 1 week.
Right.
And I
I
thought,
think
well,
yeah, that's
let's see
organized
if I
by
can do
Mark
that.
Taro Holmes.
What?
Mark Taro Holmes is the organizer of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and in this case, it was like, okay, let's see if I can put that loose approach and this quick marker technique. Can I put that to use also on people? Because normally I don't do it. The reason for that is that if you draw a house or if you draw a busy street, and if you start putting a lot of detail in the people, the speed goes out of my sketch, and I
Yeah.
don't want that. But in this case, the person was the house. So in this case, I could use the same speed on a person. And I tried a couple of these. There's a couple of pages of this. And I really love the way that you could, even if you look at it anatomically, if you see the one there down there in this breakdance move with his legs up with the green trousers, anatomically, probably it doesn't make too much sense. I could do these things by heart when I was in high school, because then I knew anatomy fully. But I lost that. But here in this sketch, you can still see that the essence of a person doing a breakdance move is there. So you can do a lot of suggestion and get that dynamic in there with a couple of lines and with a couple of dashes of color. The
Yeah.
colors are, yeah, they're not like filled in, they're just dashed around.
Are there more? I can't, no, I guess not. Well, these are great, Albert. Really, really wonderful. A lot of energy there. And I think you really did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I love to see all the stuff that you put in your sketches. And it's reminded me of another artist I interviewed. I gotta think his name. And he does these houses where he just adds, you know, a balcony and then an air conditioner and then an antenna and then there's a sign and then there's a ladder and there's this is added and that's added. There's a, you know, all this stuff is just added to it. And it becomes like part of the building. It's so fun.
Yeah,
fun.
true.
Yeah. These
So,
are
and
great.
that's also, yeah, like that is the fun that I have drawing these. If you compare this one, for instance, with some in the back, you also see that in the beginning, you would see more white and sometimes here, but that's something that I experiment with.
Yeah.
I hope this will be just one of the things that I do, but here you see a lot of blends of organic transitions between one color going into the next.
Yeah.
Hey, that's me. And I'm not even moving my hands here on this side of the camera.
Yeah, you included this with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
images that you sent me. So it's probably, this would be a good one to finish up on because we're coming up to an hour now. So if you have questions for Albert, please type them in the Q&A box. And I know I've been ignoring that Q&A box, and that's because my second screen is not working today. And so I can't see the questions, but at the end, when we finish this little video here, we'll end here, and then we'll look at your questions and have a chance for Albert to answer your questions. And so I'm noticing as you flip the page that you can see that it's coming through the other side a little bit.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's also why I can only use one side of every page.
Yeah.
Because the other one is like destroyed already.
Yeah. These are just fantastic.
Thank you.
So fun, really fun. I love how expressive they are and loose, and it's really an inspiration, I think, for a lot of people, including me, about how loose you can get if your natural inclination is to be very precise. So mine is very precise. I can't help myself. I really understand and see perspective. 1, 2, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, curvilinear. I see all that so easily for me that it's really tough to break the rules. So what I say is, when I'm sketching, I say to my students, okay, let's make this funky. And then I just try to, you know, lean it in one direction, or, you know, put in like a 3 point perspective that isn't there, or curve the line or whatever. But I'm forcing it because my natural inclination is to be very precise with my perspective. So this is
Yeah,
really
that's
inspiration, Albert.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's something that I try to. I wrote that in the. I just finished the topic on perspective there, and I explained that I wanted to show just a little, but I wanted to avoid telling people too much, because once you start to consciously construct perspective, your sketch starts to suffer from that.
Yeah.
I could see dozens of mistakes in all these images that are now paged through. There are dozens of mistakes perspective-wise, but it's also the proof that it doesn't matter.
No.
Getting the perspective right is no guarantee at all that you would have a great sketch.
Right. Yeah.
And that is something that it's nice to know something of perspective,
Right.
but it's not crucial to getting a sketch that looks really interesting.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And I think if you get too exacting, then let me see here. Just a minute. I'm gonna have to turn off my share screen just a second. Let's see what I can figure out. If you get too exacting, with a line, if you start using a ruler and you start measuring and all that kind of stuff, now you don't have a sketch anymore. You have a schematic. You know,
Yeah.
you have an architectural drawing that could be used to build a house, and that's not art. That's something different. That's a floor plan. That's a, you know, that's a schematic. So I think it's really helpful to understand perspective, but once you know it, you can break all the rules and just have
Yeah,
fun.
and try more or less try. That's really hard, but try to forget it.
Yeah.
Like for me, I almost not at all think about perspective when I'm sketching. I know, of course, the vanishing point theory, and that's why you see that things generally go in the right direction, and you see that in all these images. But apart from that, I don't try to check during sketching if everything goes the way it's supposed to go. And that's why if you study my sketches, there will be lots of places where you see that some lines probably go a little bit different than they should if you would construct it. But you don't see that if you look at the general picture. And people striving for, if I only knew perspective, then my sketches would turn out good. That's a false assumption.
Yeah.
Because then you only know a technique, and you might have ruined much of the spontaneity in your sketch by starting to be too conscious about constructing the perspective.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I have a few questions, so I'm going to we have a lot of questions here from people, and I want to get to all the questions because let's see what we can do here. So Joe is asking, can you advise what types of markers? So we're going to need quick answers here, Albert.
Okay.
Can you advise what types of markers you use for this technique? So I think you covered the brand already. It was
it was Copic, C-O-P-I-C, Copic.
Yeah.
And the other one is called Winsor and Newton. And those are these type of markers, with a pointy one having that pointy hard point, and the other end is, let me put that on a little bit of a, yeah. I'll put it on camera. There you can see the chisel point. Yeah. And my camera gets confused. Haha, I can mess up the camera. This is the broad part, and if you turn it around, you can get a very pointy one, but this is the width of that marker. So that's Winsor and Newton. So my main brands are Winsor and Newton, but there's another brand, because both Copic and Winsor and Newton are pretty expensive. If you buy 10 markers, it's easily going to cost you like $20-$30 for having a limited amount of markers.
So if people want to just start off and have sort of a starter kit, what would you recommend?
And this one I got offered by my local store here in Venlo, which is a tongue breaker. It's called Ohuhu.
Okay. Ohuhu. All right.
But these you get for like, check them on the internet, but it's like for like $34-$35. You can get like, or $36-$7. You get 36 markers. And in this case, this set, because usually if you buy like from Winsor & Newton, you get these very bright, you can get manga sets, you can get architecture sets, Copic the same thing. But these ones are very nice in color. And this is a really, really good starter kit, which goes, because that's important. You need to have markers which cover the value range. So from light to dark, not from like screaming color to screaming color, but from light to dark. Because if you have light to dark, you can build volume. You can put shadow underneath a ledge if you have a darker marker. And that set, this Ohuhu set, is really a great choice because it's quite inexpensive. It's like almost like $1 per marker.
And you got that on Amazon?
They are on Amazon. I saw them on Amazon, and they also have their own channel, I think ohuhu.com. But if you look for Ohuhu, O-H-U-H-U, you will definitely find a source near you where you can buy these.
Okay, cool. And so one more time, people are asking, what was the white marker that you used to make the white line?
That was this guy, and this is the exact one. This is let me see, put that in the light, Uni Posca.
Uni Posca. Okay, yeah.
And it is the bullet-shaped 0.7 millimeters. There's a couple of them because you also have, this is the bigger brother.
Yeah.
This one has like, a very hard tip. This one has, oh, this one has like sort of a spongy tip.
Okay. Yeah.
Look at
I
camera.
think I've used the bigger one in the past, and it's,
This one can be the destroyer of sketches, so
yeah.
be careful.
Yes.
But this is where I use the really, like, also on that flower bush, where I put these big dashes. But you need to be careful because if you push too hard, you get this really ugly white blob. But those are the Uniposcas. That's the ones that I use. But there's Molotov is a brand. There are a couple of brands, but for me, these have worked out just fine. So I stick with these.
Okay, a few more questions. Florence is asking, how can she be sure that when she tries to buy your book on Amazon that she's got your book?
The one that is published by Elitis, and that is Elytis, Elitis.
Okay.
It's a French publisher, but probably it will also say that it's a French book. And that's true in a sense that there's just a couple of introductory lines there in French because it's a French publisher, but it's a picture book. So you don't miss anything if you don't speak. I don't speak French, so
It doesn't matter.
I made a copy of it and translated it, but
Yeah.
so it's not something ugly that they wrote there. So, but it doesn't matter because it's only a small introductory text about me, and for the rest, it's just pictures. But it's published by Elitis, and if you look for Elitis, you get the right book.
Okay, couple more questions. Pat is asking, do you ever use a gel pen for your white lines?
I have tried gel pens, and for me, the result of the Poscas is better because the gel pens have these balls in them, and they skip. The Poscas don't skip because it's just a fluid line. It might be milky, but I rather have milky lines than a line that is interrupted all the time because the balls get clogged up. So I usually don't use these jelly roll pens.
Yeah. And Leanne says, I took Albert's course on Domestica and he has inspired my urban sketching journey. I love Albert's work.
Thank you. Thank you.
So nice. And Elaine is asking, please say again the type of sketchbook. It was a moleskin. Is that right?
Moleskin, yeah.
Okay.
And what I do,
Doug is saying, wonderful work, Albert, as always. Where do you get your reference photos?
I get most of them from Instagram. And if you go to my Instagram, I started, I did that from the beginning. I always credit my photographer. And I use the @ sign to, if you click on it, you can go immediately. So with every sketch that I make and is published there, if you click on the reference in my description, in the description for that specific sketch, you can go immediately to the person who made that photograph. And to go back to these books, this is how they look.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. You need to look for that blue band because they have very thin paper. I once misbought like 3 or 4 because I ran out of these and I thought, doesn't matter, I need a book. That was not the right book. So I had 3.
What's the brand? Like, what does it say on there?
It says Moleskin. Can I put that? Yeah.
Sketchbook Carnet de Croquis, and it's 165 grams. Perfect. Thank you. Art collection. And Kathy was saying there are many Ohuhu sets. Is it the pastel marker set that you recommend?
There should be a set that is called, I think it's called Gray or Neutrals. Okay. And you should buy the gray one because it's not really just gray. It's a little bit hard to see in the light. But these are the colors, and you see that they're hardly just grays. There are gray greens, there are gray blues, there are gray browns,
violets,
and it's really a really nice set. And you can also see the value range going from light to dark. So this is a really good starter kit. And if you, apart from this, buy 1 or 2 like really big, like flashy colors to
Yeah,
put accents if you want, you're set. But with this starter set, you're already set very well. And the nice thing that they have as well, they think of everything probably. They have this bleed sheet.
oh,
It's like a plasticky thing that you can put underneath your page. So they think about that thing too.
perfect, perfect. And a couple more questions here. When you're looking for a new building to draw, Emerson asks, are there certain things you're looking for or to avoid?
Usually I don't look for big buildings because the bigger the building, like if it's a high riser or a really large structure, uh, I tend to slow down because to suggest detail in those buildings, you need to start putting in lots of tiny windows, which so big structures I usually avoid. Um, but apart from that, if I look at images, if something hits me, like, wow, this is something that I really want to draw, I take it. And also because I also do sometimes do some Photoshop preparation. That's a step that you can see some of that on my YouTube channel where I explain some of that and I also show that process. Sometimes I think, okay, I'm going to take this photo, put it in Photoshop, re-Frankenstein it, cut it up and put this there, make this larger, make this smaller, make this squashed and start from that. And that's also a fun part because there I can exercise both digital skills and
Yeah,
something in prep. So for me, there it's like I want to enjoy the process of that sketch
yeah.
and everything that allows me to do that. So if it's a nice photograph or a nice starting point from a photograph, that's what I take.
Cool. Sandra's asking, please spell the uni white pen. That was Uni Posca, Posca. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Linda's asking, do you use chisel and brush or fine and brush?
Can I put that?
There we
Yeah,
go.
here we go.
Uni Posca. And do you use the chisel and brush or fine and brush?
I use from the markers, I use the chisel and fine tip because since I don't use the brush, for me the other tip doesn't matter. I always use the chisel. There for Copic, you have two brands. Yeah, they have three. They have the Copic Ciao, CIAO, which is the cheapest of the brands from Copic. You have the Copic Classic. That's this one. That's like this square boxy one. And you have the Copic Sketch, which is this one, which has like this flattened outline.
Yeah.
This brand from Copic Sketch, has the widest range of colors. If you buy them all, $2,000 and more. So I don't have them all.
Okay. Wow.
If you go for the Ohuhu, the whole set, it's also like 320 colors. It's like $230. So that's a factor of 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Couple of more things here. Somebody's asking, please say the name of your book again. It's Au Japan.
Oh,
And
Japan.
Au Japan. So it's in French, but it doesn't matter because
It doesn't
it's
matter.
all images.
Yeah.
And that is published by Elitist, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. We're not going to be able to get through all the questions. Somebody's mentioning that you have a YouTube channel where people can go and see. Can you tell us the URL for that?
I think it's also like youtube.com / and then @ and also howsketcher. I didn't think that something like that would work, but I punched it in once and it works.
Cool.
So if you punch youtube.com / howsketcher, you should be able to get there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Albert, for chatting with us today. We learned a lot. I mean, I learned a lot. I'm inspired. I just might try those alcohol markers and see what I can do.
Give it a try. I think it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Albert. And so everyone, this is our last free interview of the year. And I want to say a special thanks to everyone who tunes into these interviews regularly. And I see the list of people who signed up for the workshop, for the interview today. And I'm like, wow, I've seen that name again and again and again. And you know who you are. And I just really want to say thank you sincerely for coming to these interviews and these demos. I'm very grateful. And also, we're going to be offering more free interviews and demos in 2024. So if you want to know about that, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you go to the website, www.studio56boutique.com, as soon as you click on there, in 5 seconds, a pop-up will be there where you can subscribe to the newsletter, and then you'll be alerted about our upcoming free interviews and demos. And also, what are you doing in 2024? What are you doing for a vacation? You need to feed your creative soul. And so why not sketch along with me and one of these great artists that I work with in a gorgeous location where we will sketch, and hang out with like-minded sketchers and artists, and we'll immerse ourselves in a new culture and get inspired. So that's my pitch to you, and I want you to think about it. Now, everyone, have a wonderful new year, and we'll see you in 2024. Bye for now. Bye, Albert. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye,
Take
Brenda.
good
Thanks for
care.
having me. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.